Hey guys, tonight we drift far from the neon buzz and endless scroll of your modern life. You're stepping barefoot into ancient Nubia. Yes, that sun-baked strip of the Nile where kingdoms rose, clay cooled your ankles, and medicine was inked into your skin, one dot at a time. The stars are sharp tonight, the wind tastes like dust and crushed herbs, and if you're lucky, you might leave with a permanent reminder scratched right into your flesh. You're standing in the middle of a quiet village, its clustered huts glowing faintly from the low flicker of oil lamps. The Nile whispers somewhere close, reeds swaying in tune. Crickets chirp. Smoke curls from a cooking pot, left to simmer overnight. Somewhere, a woman hums a lullaby, and nearby, another woman dips a needle into thick, earthy ink. You've arrived at the crossroads of pain, tradition, and innovation. And you probably won't survive this if you're squeamish about needles. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, drop your city and local time in the comments. I love seeing where in the world we're falling asleep together. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You duck into a palm frond-covered doorway and sit beside the tattoo mistress. She's older than the hills that flank this part of the Nile, with fingers stained by decades of pigment and stories. Her teeth flash as she grins at you, sizing you up. She already knows what ails you. Maybe it's the way you walk, maybe it's the dryness in your breath, but she's ready. You can feel it in your bones, the kind of readiness that comes from solving the body's riddles one ink mark at a time. In ancient Nubia, medicine wasn't always about swallowing something bitter or boiling strange roots. Sometimes it was about being still, letting someone who knew the language of skin draw it out of you, literally. Using obsidian needles or sharpened bone slivers, healers tapped ink into precise parts of the body to treat specific symptoms. If your lower back throbbed, a cluster of dots near your spine might calm it. If your lungs wheezed, tiny crescents would bloom just under your collarbones. This wasn't just for show. Many believe these tattoos followed a proto-medical logic not unlike acupuncture. Specific symbols mapped to nerves, pressure points, or even emotional imbalances. And yes, while no Nubian was walking around with a white lab coat, their knowledge, passed from grandmother to apprentice to daughter, was astonishingly consistent. One mainstream theory suggests certain recurring tattoo patterns aligned with chronic joint conditions, arthritic elders wearing their symptoms in delicate ink near inflamed joints. But tattooing here wasn't simply utilitarian, it was sacred, and kind of stylish too. Patterns were designed not just to heal, but to comfort, connect, and protect. Picture concentric spirals that resembled river currents, straight lines that mirrored horizon silhouettes, or dots laid out like stars in a careful constellation. Each had a purpose, even if not everyone today agrees on what exactly that purpose was. Historians still argue whether these tattoos were first and foremost medical, magical, decorative, or something beautifully tangled in between. Some insist they were prayers pressed into the skin. Others argue they were mnemonic, visual notes for healers. Still others see them as ritual scars, worn like armor against disease and bad spirits alike. You're watching the process now, up close. The tattoo mistress studies her needle. Her client is a young man with a cough that just won't quit. As he lies back, she begins tapping ink just above the breastbone. The needle dips rhythmically, like a heartbeat. You flinch for him, but he doesn't even blink. He's breathing more evenly already, as if the ink pulls the sickness out. Or maybe he's just comforted by the ritual, the attention, the whispered chants in the background. The tools are humble but efficient. Soot and river clay mixed into a thick paste stored in a smooth coconut shell. The needle, a fragment of obsidian, sharper than anything you've seen in your medicine cabinet. The process is deliberate, silent except for the occasional crackle of fire and murmur of a lullaby outside. There's a sense of time folding in on itself, as if this moment could have happened 300 years ago or 3,000, and not much would be different. And the healing didn't stop at physical ailments. Some inkings were meant to soothe the soul, protection from grief, calming wild dreams, guarding expectant mothers from sky-born spirits. You overhear one old woman mutter something about a neighbor's daughter. She received a moon-shaped tattoo on her wrist to prevent heartache after her betrothed drowned. Who needs therapy when your wrist can remember for you? And don't forget, these tattoos weren't always visible. Some of the most powerful marks were tucked behind the ears, under the feet, or low on the back, close to nerves, hidden from envious eyes, and believed to be more potent because of their secrecy. Tattoos as secret spells. As the night deepens, you lie on your back in the sand, tracing imaginary ink patterns on your own arm, imagining what ailments your body might confess under the right touch. A drifting thought. In a world without x-rays or stethoscopes, perhaps ink was the next best thing. Part roadmap, part prayer, part placebo. And maybe, just maybe, that old woman with the smoky laugh and the ink-stained hands knew more about healing than you thought. You wake, or maybe you never really slept, beneath the endless stars, wrapped in the gentle quiet of Nubia's ancient night. The village has hushed to a slow rhythm. Somewhere, a baby wails softly, then quiets as a lullaby floats through the air like smoke. And you're back at the healer's side, watching her rinse a needle in warm water, steeped with crushed herbs. She looks at you and gestures. Tonight, it's your turn. No, you're not dying, yet. But your shoulders have been tight since forever. Your sleep has been twitchy. And you've had that weird knee click since the full moon. She chuckles, as if she can see all this without you saying a word. And before you can ask for a second opinion, she's already mixing pigment. You watch her grind soot and ash with oil scraped from the seeds of the castor plant, thick, dark, and gleaming under the flickering torchlight. She adds crushed hematite for that deep red undertone, not because it looks pretty, but because iron-rich pigments, they believe, calm the fire in the blood. It smells like smoke and earth, somehow both ancient and freshly made. The Nubians didn't just make tattoo ink with anything they could find. They curated it, like early pharmacists. Soot from burnt date palms was prized for its smoothness. Clay from certain river bends contained healing minerals. Plant extracts acted as natural anesthetics or antimicrobials. Though, to be honest, some were probably chosen just because they smelled nice or stained deep. And no, they weren't sterilizing anything by modern standards, but their ingredients, surprisingly clever. Clay can absorb toxins, ash contains lye, a mild disinfectant, and some early tattoo inks included resin from frankincense or myrrh, not just because they smell fancy, but because they actually help reduce inflammation. Who knew your great-great-great-grandmother's skincare routine had lab-grade logic? The palette varies, depending on region and healer. Some preferred bluish ink, copper-based, cooling. Others used yellow ochre to mark out heat-related illnesses. And in at least one odd case, archaeologists uncovered evidence of tattoo ink that included, wait for it, powdered fish bones for circulating energy, allegedly. Whether that worked or just gave the healer bragging rights, no one's sure. Historians still argue whether each healer invented their own palette or followed an established rubric passed down like a recipe book. There's evidence on both sides. Some burial sites show repeating pigment blends and ink shades consistent over generations. Others suggest regional improvisation, healers tailoring pigment to the patient's status, symptoms, or even their astrological sign. You glance again at the tattoo mistress's tools. Her ink bowl is carved from ivory, lined with beeswax to keep the paste from drying out too quickly. The brush, a misnomer, is more like a stylus made from porcupine quill. Surprisingly flexible, capable of stippling tiny patterns. She taps it against a piece of leather to test the flow. Satisfied, she lifts your arm and begins. The first tap is sharper than you expect. Not unbearable, but precise, like the sting of a nettle followed by heat spreading gently under your skin. She hums as she works. You close your eyes. Her fingers guide the ink into a pattern just above your inner elbow. 3 dots, a curved line, and what looks suspiciously like a beetle. Apparently, this design encourages circulation and deters numbing winds from settling into joints. You don't know about the wind thing, but you do feel oddly relaxed. As she works, another apprentice begins prepping for a different client. This one's a child, maybe 7, with an itchy rash running down her leg. The apprentice isn't tattooing her yet. Instead, she paints a diagnostic grid directly on the skin, like a temporary map, to observe how the inflammation spreads. If certain dots flare red while others fade, it helps identify inner imbalance. A clever trick. One modern researcher called it the ancient version of thermographic imaging, which sounds exaggerated until you see it in action. Meanwhile, outside the hut, the air cools. The village settles deeper into its sleepy silence. You hear distant flute music and the soft clatter of river frogs. The scent of burning acacia wood drifts in, sweet and slightly medicinal. A few villagers sit in a circle comparing the week's treatments. One man swears his lower back pain eased within 3 days of receiving a tortoiseshell spiral just above his waistband. Another laughs, claiming it's the hot stones, not the ink, doing the work. But even he has a fresh mark glowing faintly on his shoulder blade. Somewhere between belief and biology, something works. The line between medicine and ritual in Nubia was always blurred. Healing wasn't just about the body. It was about story, ancestry, balance. You didn't just get a tattoo and call it a day. You were marked into a system, watched, cared for, noted. Your pain was part of a pattern shared by others, studied, compared, and your healing was a group effort. An elder's memory, a neighbor's observation, a healer's hand. You shift slightly, careful not to smudge your fresh tattoo. It's warm, not burning, a little sore, but oddly comforting. Like your body was finally understood, as if it had been whispering its needs and someone finally listened in ink. In the quiet that follows, you stare up at the sky. Stars blink, the river hums, and you wonder how many others, thousands of years ago, lay just like this after receiving a pattern meant to heal them.
The sun hasn't risen yet, but the faintest pink blush is starting to bloom on the eastern horizon. You're still lying there, on the packed earth floor of the tattoo mistress's hut, the scent of ink and smoke clinging to your skin. The new tattoo itches slightly, just enough to remind you it's there, just enough to make you wonder how your body is already starting to shift, maybe to heal. You sit up slowly, stretch, and notice a line of villagers waiting outside. Some hold baskets, others lean on canes, their expressions etched with the weight of chronic pain, or perhaps simply age. Everyone's got something to treat: a sore hip, a stubborn rash, headaches that won't quit. And for all of them, the solution might be as small as a dot or as intricate as a shoulder full of geometric lines. You move through the village, the sounds of roosters and creaking wooden carts starting to stir. In the light, you can see how the tattoos vary, not just in pattern or size, but in logic. Some are placed in the obvious spots: knees, shoulders, backs. But others are scattered in ways that feel like riddles: a single triangle behind the ear, a cluster of lines over the ribcage, a dot just below the thumbnail. You begin to realize there is a system here, a language even, and you don't speak it yet. Today, you're learning how they read the body. One of the elder healers motions you over and hands you a worn palm leaf scroll. It's covered in what looks like doodles, stick figures, dots, squiggles, wavy lines. She points to one, then gestures toward a woman sitting cross-legged nearby. You notice that the woman's tattoo matches the symbol. You glance back at the scroll. It's not a medical chart exactly. It's more like a storybook of symptoms. pain lines, ailment dots, and symbolic echoes, each one carefully placed. One mainstream theory, widely accepted today, suggests that these early tattoo systems acted as visual diagnostics, guiding the healer toward a treatment plan, sort of like having your entire medical history literally written on your body. For instance, recurring stomach issues. You might have a set of vertical lines tattooed just under the ribcage. Lower back pain, small clusters along the sacrum. Chronic fatigue, spiral patterns drawn outward from the sternum, meant to awaken the chest. Historians believed that the design logic was passed down orally and visually, not through written record, so exact interpretations are hard to pin down. But the patterns show up again and again in preserved mummies, cave paintings, and oral histories from Nubian descendants. Still, scholars debate, were these marks standardized, or did each healer freestyle based on what they saw or felt? Some argued the designs had fixed meanings, a visual code. Others suggest they were more intuitive, personalized readings of each patient's spirit and symptom, like a jazz solo but with needles. You walk past a woman grinding herbs in a stone bowl. Her arms are covered in what look like symmetrical barcodes, short, even lines across the forearms. She notices you staring and smiles, holding out her wrist. You see that each set of lines is paired with a small circle, like punctuation marks in a sentence. She explains, gestures, it's more eyes and hands than words, that she used to get tremors. The ink helps lock her hands in place. Maybe it's belief, maybe it's muscle memory, or maybe both. That's the thing about Nubian tattoo medicine. It walks the edge between science and spell, logic and luck. It doesn't care whether the cure is chemical or communal, as long as you feel better. A child runs past, laughing, and you notice his legs are dotted with ink, tiny spirals near the knees and ankles. You learn from a nearby auntie that it's preventative. He's always tripping over things, so the family decided to charm his balance with grounding marks, kind of like ancient stabilizers. You chuckle, imagining modern parents tattooing kids instead of handing them knee pads. Fringe fact of the day, some tattoos were diagnostic predictions. If a person was prone to a certain type of illness, say lung infections in the cold season, they'd receive a tattoo in that body zone before any symptoms appeared. It was the ancient version of catching something early, just with a little more sting and a lot more symbolism. And of course, there were symbols you were never supposed to copy. You pass an elderly man with a wide line tattooed diagonally across his chest, covered by a series of arrowheads pointing inward. A younger man explains in a hushed voice that those marks are reserved for survivors of a particular fever, a fever known to claim entire households. Only those who lived through it earned the mark, and wearing it without reason was believed to bring sickness upon you. Like wearing a medal you didn't earn, except the penalty wasn't just social, it was spiritual. Historians still argue whether this system of pain mapping and symbolic placement influenced neighboring cultures. Some believe it migrated northward into early Egyptian healing arts. Others say it likely developed independently. But one tantalizing theory connects Nubian tattoo medicine with the later concept of reflexology, the idea that pressing or marking one part of the body affects another. The dotted knees of a Nubian child, not so different from the pressure points of a modern chart. You find yourself tracing the lines of your own new tattoo again. Maybe you don't know exactly what it means, but somehow that doesn't matter, because it feels like a message, a whispered reply from your body saying, "Thanks for listening." And as the sky blooms golden over the Nile, you stretch your arms, breathe deep, and feel just for a moment that the world, your aches, and your ink are all perfectly in balance.
The sun climbs higher, casting long golden beams across the village paths as the morning hum begins. You're already on the move, feet crunching softly on packed earth as you follow a group of villagers toward the banks of the Nile. Today, you'll learn about the hands behind the needles, the women whose fingers stitch healing into flesh, one dot at a time. You'd be forgiven for assuming this was a man's world. Most ancient medical traditions were heavily patriarchal. But in Nubia, tattooing was largely a woman's domain. Not just the act of applying ink, but the deep knowledge behind it, the diagnostics, the rituals, the pigment recipes. And you're about to meet some of the most respected healers in the region, the tattoo matriarchs. You're welcomed into a courtyard where 3 elderly women sit beneath a woven canopy, their hands busy with bowls, stones, and tools. They barely glance at you at first, more focused on the subtle art of mixing just the right pigment consistency. One of them, her skin wrinkled like river bark and arms inked with concentric circles, nods for you to sit. She dips a finger into a pot and smears a line on your arm. Testing. Always testing. They work with an ease that speaks of decades, maybe lifetimes of experience. Their fingers are stained with soot, ochre, and oil. Their faces bear the quiet weight of wisdom, not the loud, flashy kind, but the sort that shows up in the way they never second-guess a movement. They've seen thousands of bodies, read pain like poetry, and administered comfort without needing to speak much at all. One woman begins tattooing a younger apprentice. It's not for practice, it's her initiation. You watch as the girl closes her eyes, breathing slowly as her teacher taps a tiny crescent just behind her left ear. It's symbolic, the ear that listens to pain. All new apprentices receive this mark. It means you're ready to hear what others carry. The process is deliberate. No rush, no fuss. The needle, carved bone, honed to a perfect point, is tapped in gentle rhythm, each motion accompanied by a whispered phrase, half lullaby, half command. Calm the skin, open the wind, leave no shadow. You're not entirely sure what it means, but your body responds anyway. Goosebumps rise on your arm. These matriarchs aren't just doctors. They're part shamans, part therapists, part neighborhood historians. They know who had what illness last winter, whose child was born breech, who cries in their sleep. Their knowledge is passed down orally, mother to daughter, elder to apprentice. There are no scrolls here, no diagrams, just memory, muscle, and murmured secrets. One of them laughs suddenly, pointing to a scar on her own wrist. She explains that as a child, she'd faked a cough for attention. Her grandmother saw through it, but gave her a tiny reminder dot anyway, right near the pulse. It's still there, faint and raised. To keep me honest, she says with a mischievous grin. Here comes your fringe tidbit. Some tattoo matriarchs believed the skin talked if you knew how to listen. They'd press, stretch, tap, waiting for color shifts or texture changes. One healer swore she could smell certain illnesses. Another said she could hear a tone in the way a person winced. Sound far-fetched? Maybe. But if you've ever had a grandma diagnose your flu just by looking at you sideways, you know the vibe. One mainstream fact, archaeologists have found actual tattoo kits buried with elderly women in Nubian caves. These included pigment pots, carved needles, smoothing stones, and even tiny incantation tokens, beads marked with healing words. The placement of these items in graves suggests not just a personal practice, but a socially honored role. These women were respected, necessary, trusted. You ask one of the healers what makes a good tattoo mistress. She pauses, thinking. Then she says slowly, soft fingers, sharp eyes, and no fear of blood. She taps your shoulder playfully. You have 1.5 of those. You're flattered and also slightly concerned. Despite the authority they hold, there's no arrogance here, no showmanship, just competence wrapped in quiet humor. You watch as one of the women stitches a zigzag pattern into a farmer's lower back, meant to untangle the spine. He winces once, then breathes out in a long sigh.
She pats his shoulder and hands him a piece of flatbread wrapped in herbs, healing Nubian style. As the morning stretches on, villagers cycle through. A woman with wrist pain from grinding millet, a child with frequent nosebleeds, a shepherd whose foot swells during rainy season. Each one receives care. Tattoos, salves, words, or just a moment of focused attention. Historians still argue whether tattooing was considered a true medical field in Nubia, or something closer to spiritual therapy. Some claim it was formalized, passed down through generations with precision. Others argue that it was personal, intuitive, and inconsistent between regions. But either way, there's no denying the role these women played, not just in healing bodies, but in binding communities together. As midday approaches, you find yourself helping grind pigment, slowly, carefully, as one of the matriarchs critiques your wrist movement with a sly smile. Not bad, but your mix smells like scared goat. Fair. By now, you've stopped flinching at the tapping sound of bone needle on skin. It's become background music, a steady heartbeat to village life. You realize healing in this place is never rushed. It's an art, a relationship, a kind of inked conversation between skin and soul. And as you sit among the matriarchs, hands dirty with clay, the Nile glimmering in the distance, you start to feel what they feel. The calm rhythm of people who trust their own hands, their community, and their ancestors. By afternoon, the air is thick with heat and the buzz of insects. The village slows to a hush. People retreat indoors, animals nap under makeshift shelters, and you find yourself walking alongside a narrow path toward the riverbank. Today's lesson moves beyond the healer's hands. Now you're here to understand the skin itself, the sacred canvas that told not just medical stories, but life stories. In Nubian culture, skin was more than flesh. It was text, it was memory, it was contract and confession all at once. And tattoos? Tattoos were the writing. You find shade under a wide acacia tree, where a group of teenagers are playfully comparing the marks on their arms and ankles. Some tattoos are fresh, still raised and deep in color. Others have faded into soft whispers of what they once were. Every mark has meaning, not just in shape or placement, but in when it was given. You sit next to a girl maybe 15 or 16 who's just received her first tattoo this morning, a delicate trio of dots just above the left hip bone. She says it means she's entered womanhood, not in a grand, dramatic ceremony, but in a quiet, deeply personal moment recognized by the village's elders. Her mother and aunt received the same mark, in the same place, at the same age. Her grandmother, too. A dotted lineage, passed skin to skin. Here's a mainstream fact. Ancient Nubians, particularly women, used tattoos to mark life milestones. Puberty, childbirth, recovery from illness, marriage, mourning. These weren't medical tattoos in the strictest sense, but they often had protective or health-based functions. A spiral near the navel might be inked after a difficult pregnancy. A zigzag near the collarbone might be for respiratory strength, especially in households that cooked over open fires. You notice something else. These marks aren't random. They're placed with precision, symmetry, intention. Each tells a story, but only to those who know the code. Some of the teenagers have shapes that echo each other. Small circles just below the elbow, triangles at the base of the neck. When you ask about it, one of the boys grins and says, "It's our crew." It turns out tattooing was also used to create social identity, like ancient friendship bracelets, except permanent and way cooler. A group of friends might all share a symbol to mark an oath, a shared experience, or just to annoy their parents. Fringe tidbit? There are rare reports of reverse tattoos, symbols removed or over-inked to erase a past event, often love gone sour or a failed apprenticeship. A few elders believe that intentionally disrupting the pattern could throw your health or destiny off course. One woman even claims her neighbor fell ill after trying to cover a heartbreak tattoo with a poorly chosen fish symbol. Fish, apparently, are unpredictable, emotionally and symbolically. And then there are the mourning marks. You follow the group toward a cluster of elders sitting near the water's edge. One woman is quiet, holding a small woven talisman and staring into the current. Her arm bears a faded line, curved like a scythe, inked from wrist to elbow. It's a grief tattoo for a daughter lost many harvests ago. In Nubia, mourning wasn't only tears and time, it was also etched. A person might receive a mark in memory of the dead, often in a place they could touch daily. Some believed it helped keep the departed close. Others said it allowed grief to escape through the skin, so it wouldn't poison the soul. Historians still argue whether these life-stage tattoos served mainly spiritual purposes or if they acted as functional records. Some researchers believed they helped track fertility cycles or medical history, an early form of wearable health records. Others argue that the symbols were too variable to hold consistent meaning across communities. But nearly all agree the repetition of key symbols across centuries suggests shared cultural understanding. And these shared meanings weren't always solemn. Some tattoos were playful. You see a young man with a snake curling up his forearm, tail wrapped around his wrist. It's not a warning, it's a boast. He's fast, flexible, good with his hands. Tattoos in Nubia could flirt just as easily as they could heal. You pause and take stock of the marks around you, on children, elders, mothers, workers, even the occasional livestock herder passing by. Each one carries a layered message: pain and pride, joy and loss, health and hope, all etched into flesh with patience and purpose. And then there's you. Your tattoo has settled into a faint burn, not painful, but alive, like your skin is humming a low song only you can hear. It may be just a dot and a curve, but now you understand what it really is. A paragraph in a much longer story. A story about you, yes, but also about every body that came before you and the ancient hands that inked memory onto skin again and again. As the Nile ripples nearby and the wind shifts through tall reeds, you wonder, in a world where most memories fade, maybe this was how they tried to hold on.
You're standing by the river now. Cool mud squishing between your toes, the breeze carrying the scent of papyrus and the faint metallic tang of fish. Today, the village's tattoo matriarch has agreed to show you something special, something most outsiders never get to see: the body charts. No, they're not scrolls or tablets. Nubians didn't diagram pain the way we would today, with sterile lines and Latin labels. Their charts were living, passed on through gesture, muscle memory, and most remarkably, tattoo dolls. She brings one out, wrapped in linen, a small, worn figurine, carved from river clay and sun-baked hard. Its surface is etched with patterns, dots, zigzags, spirals, grids, exactly where one would find them on a human body. The doll is no taller than your hand, but it holds generations of knowledge. This one, she says, quietly, tapping a faint cluster of dots on the doll's left knee, is for joint pain during the cold moon. She turns it over and shows you a wavy line across the lower back. For blocked waters, sometimes the kidneys, sometimes the mood. She smiles. The body doesn't always tell you what it means, so you learn to guess gently. A mainstream historical fact: in parts of ancient Nubia, tattoo dolls and painted figurines were used by healers as visual guides. Some even buried them with their tools, perhaps to take their healing knowledge into the afterlife. Others were kept in communal huts, passed hand to hand as a reference. They weren't just memory aids, they were teaching tools. The matriarch invites her youngest apprentice to bring out a second doll, newer, smoother, less detailed. It has only a few markings so far. This is hers, she says. She adds to it when she learns something new. That's the thing about Nubian tattoo medicine.
It wasn't just a tradition, it was a conversation, passed down skin to skin, hand to hand over centuries, a collective memory etched in clay and flesh. Fringe fact: some dolls were found to have hollow centers, stuffed with herbs or sacred stones. Scholars still argue whether this was symbolic, a physical embodiment of medicine within, or practical, like a time capsule of healing recipes. A few have even speculated that these dolls were used in ritual healing, placed beside patients during treatment like Lucky Charms or energetic amplifiers. It's debated, but undeniably fascinating. You run your fingers along the etched clay, feeling the grooves like tiny rivers. The matriarch gently rotates the doll so you can see its soles. There, on the bottom of each foot, are tiny concentric circles. For grounding, she says, and for dreams. Apparently, dream-related tattoos were their own category. Symbols placed on the temples, behind the ears, or along the spine's base were said to influence dream states. Some enhanced visions, others protected against nightmares. A mark at the base of the skull, a curved line like a sickle, was believed to help retain dreams after waking. A Nubian mnemonic written on skin. As you listen, another elder joins the group and places a third object in the dirt between you, a flat slab of polished stone, almost mirror-like. On its surface are drawn faint ink lines, like a faded map. It's a tattoo planning slate. You watch as the healers sketch a hypothetical pattern for a man struggling with breathlessness. They test designs on the slate, erase with water, and redraw. It's quiet, slow, and utterly deliberate. No tattoo is applied without deep discussion. This process, you learn, is called reading the path. Before any mark is made, the healer reads the patient's body like terrain, checking the lines of movement, areas of heat, discoloration, even posture. Tattooing without reading the path is considered dangerous, like planting seeds in rocky soil. You think back to your own mark, now healed into a soft ridge on your inner arm. Was your path read? You smile. Of course it was. Historians still debate whether Nubians inherited this tattoo mapping tradition from earlier cultures or developed it independently. Some argue for a connection to ancient Egyptian scarification practices. Others point to similarities with Berber and Bedouin ink traditions. But most agree what Nubia had was uniquely holistic. It wasn't just treatment. It was a system of care, memory, and identity layered into one. And here comes the joke you didn't expect. One of the older women chuckles and tells you not to let the apprentice practice on your back unless you really like crooked lines. Last week, she gave a man a snake, and it came out looking like a noodle. Everyone laughs. Even the apprentice rolls her eyes. There's levity in this seriousness, proof that even sacred things are allowed to breathe. You're invited to try sketching your own pattern. Your fingers tremble slightly as you trace the line across the slate. A spiral here, a dot there. The matriarch watches silently, then nods. You've been paying attention. Mostly. Mostly is good enough for now. As the afternoon shadows lengthen and the light turns gold, you help clean the tools, rinse the dolls, and return the slates to their shelf. You glance back at the tattoo figurines, now resting in their linen bundles like small, sleeping ancestors. And as you walk away, feet dusted with river mud, a simple truth settles in your bones. Some of the oldest medicine doesn't live in books or bottles. It lives in the lines we wear. And those lines, they remember.
Evening is creeping in now, painting the village in warm amber, as cooking fires spark to life and voices drift lazily through the air. You're still at the edge of the village, seated beside a small group gathered for tonight's story session. Not just any story, but one centered around one of the most mysterious and revered figures in Nubian tattoo lore, the Bone Needle Woman.
Someone hands you a carved gourd of cooled hibiscus tea, tart and earthy. You sip slowly, the tang sharp on your tongue, and settle into the sand. The fire crackles, casting flickers of orange light on the storyteller's face as she begins, not with a greeting, but with a question. Do you know who first taught the skin to speak? You don't answer. No one does. That's the point. And so begins the legend. The bone needle woman, the tale goes, was not born, but woven, stitched together from the sinew of knowledge, the ash of suffering, and the dust of forgotten herbs. She lived alone near the cliffs, and people only visited her when desperate. Failing limbs, failing hearts, dreams filled with shadows. Her tattoos didn't look like anyone else's. Long, winding lines, marks that shimmered strangely in firelight, some said. And unlike other healers, she didn't ask what hurt. She simply knew. The elders say she had a needle carved from the thigh bone of a lioness, and ink mixed with midnight and memory. Her tattoos never faded, and those who received them, some swore they healed overnight. Others claimed their dreams became prophecies. A few disappeared entirely, never seen again, but people still whispered their names with respect. You shift, caught somewhere between amused and unnerved. It's clear this story isn't just folklore, it's identity. The bone needle woman isn't a literal person. She's the essence of Nubian tattoo wisdom, distilled into one mythic figure. Mainstream historical fact, many cultures personified medical knowledge through myth, figures like Imhotep in Egypt or Asclepius in Greece. For the Nubians, the bone needle woman may have served a similar purpose, not just a symbol of healing, but a boundary, a reminder that with great power, piercing skin, altering fate, came great risk. Fringe theory? Some archaeologists believe the legend might be based on a real person, or rather, people, a lineage of particularly gifted tattoo matriarchs whose techniques and unusual patterns became so renowned they transcended generations, fusing into a single semi-divine identity. The tale wasn't about one woman, it was about all of them. The storyteller continues. One evening, a young man came to the bone needle woman, complaining of dreams where his breath turned to sand. She traced a line from his chest to his throat, whispering, "You speak too often and listen too little." She tattooed a spiral under his tongue, not on the surface, but in the invisible ink of silence. From then on, he never lied again, not because he couldn't, but because he heard himself first. You grin. It's a cheeky story, sure, but it hits deep. The tattoo didn't mute him, it tuned him. Someone beside you chuckles. She once tattooed a man's shadow, they say, followed it until it behaved. Everyone laughs. It's ridiculous. It's perfect. Another tale. She inked a mother's feet so she would always find her way home, no matter the storm. The tattoos looked like waves but held the pattern of stars. That's how she saved her child, by never being lost. It's impossible to say where history ends and metaphor begins. That's the beauty. The story works whether you believe it or not. And here's the twist. Every tattoo matriarch at some point adds a single mark in the style of the bone needle woman. Just one, hidden, meant only for the patient and the healer. A silent signature, a blessing in disguise. Historians still debate what these bone marks were. Some claim they were stylistic quirks, a flourish in the line, an extra dot. Others suggest they were protective glyphs, rooted in ancient language now lost. A few argue the bone needle woman never existed at all, that the legend arose simply to explain particularly difficult symbols found on mummies. But you don't need an answer. Not tonight. You lie back in the sand, watching smoke rise into a sky now dotted with stars. The story has finished, but its echo lingers. You find your fingers drifting to your own tattoo again. Could a whisper of her be in your ink too? The fire crackles, someone yawns, a flute starts up somewhere gentle and slow. You realize this is how stories are preserved in Nubia, not just through memory, but through repetition. Not carved into stone, but in skin, shadow, and the hush between jokes. And maybe, just maybe, that's better. Stone crumbles, paper burns, but stories told under stars, passed with laughter and touch, those last forever.
Morning mists drapes the village in quiet as you awaken to the soft clatter of grinding stones and the low hum of a familiar melody drifting in from nearby huts. Today feels different, not solemn, not urgent, but intentional. You're being led toward a special place, a sacred place. Not everyone gets to go there. The tattoo matriarchs have invited you to visit the House of Healing Marks. It's not what you expect. There are no grand stone columns or towering shrines, just a modest building, its walls smoothed from years of hands brushing past. Its door is made of woven reeds and opened with a gentle tug. Inside, the air is thick with the scent of cedar, crushed herbs, and old stories. This is where the community stores its most precious medical tattoo knowledge, not in books, not in jars, but in marked skins. Stretched across wooden frames, preserved animal hides hang like scrolls along the walls. Each one displays a pattern of tattoo markings, carefully copied from human bodies over generations. Don't worry, no people were harmed for these. These are recreations, transferred respectfully by healers before a person's death, as a way to archive their body's story. One matriarch leads you to a hide that belonged to a farmer's wife who lived 3 lifetimes ago. Her skin, at least in this preserved replica, is mapped with spirals along the ribs for breathing, chevrons on the wrists for strength in grinding, and a starburst above the heart for joy, the matriarch says. Her voice hushed. She asked for it, said she wanted to remember what it felt like to laugh after a long sickness. Mainstream historical fact: Nubian burial sites have revealed tattooed mummies with remarkable detail. One woman buried near the Nile had dozens of tiny cross-hatch marks down her arms and back. Archaeologists believed these were medicinal, perhaps related to back pain or arthritis. The sheer complexity suggests not just utility, but artistry. Tattooing wasn't a last resort. It was often the first line of care. You're guided toward the back wall, where the most intricate hide is displayed. It's larger and older and clearly treated with reverence. This one belonged to a healer, your guide explains. Her body told the stories of others. Indeed, the markings on this hide seem to represent different patients. A snake coiled around a finger, a fish near the hip, a cracked sun near the ankle. Each symbol corresponds to a person the healer treated, like a living chart of her medical career. Fringe theory? Some believe healers marked themselves after each major healing, less as a trophy, more as a promise. Your pain is remembered. You pause in front of a hide with unusual markings, rows of dots that almost resemble Braille. When you ask, the matriarch smiles. That one's experimental. One healer believed you could read muscle memory by touch. She walks over and gently presses her fingers against the pattern. See? The skin knows. Historians still argue whether these hide archives were widespread or rare. Some say only the most elite or skilled healers practiced this kind of record-keeping. Others argue it was once common, but few examples survived the humid climate. Either way, the House of Healing Marks is a testament to how seriously the Nubians took the link between memory,
medicine, and the body. At one corner of the room is a small shrine, barely the size of a nightstand. On it sits a carved stone bowl filled with old needles, now dulled with age. Each one belonged to a different generation. They are not used anymore, but they are not discarded. They are honored, laid to rest like soldiers who served long tours. You're invited to add your own mark to a communal cloth, a living document of everyone who has learned in this place. You dip a fingertip in red ochre and press a dot beside hundreds of others. Now you're part of the story, the elder says. There's a quiet reverence in the room, not stiff or ceremonial, but deeply personal. You realize the difference. This isn't a museum. It's not here to impress you. It's a memory, still alive. The House of Healing Marks doesn't preserve history. It participates in it. You step outside into warm daylight, blinking against the sun. Someone offers you a slice of honeyed flatbread. A child runs past you, laughing, a freshly tattooed dot gleaming on her shoulder. Life flows forward here, but always with one eye on the past. And as you sit under a flowering tree, chewing slowly, you think about the people who once bore those marks, their lives, their pain, their joy, their bodies remembered, not in stone or ink alone, but in every healer who still carries their story forward.
By midday, the heat is thick and unmoving, the kind that makes every movement feel deliberate, like you're walking through warm water. A group of elders wave you over, not with urgency, but with a quiet kind of welcome. Today, you're going to learn something unexpected. How Nubian tattoos weren't just for people, but for the land. Wait, how does land get tattooed? You'll see. You follow them up a low ridge just outside the village. From here, the Nile sprawls below like a silver ribbon, slicing through the sandy gold. But they're not pointing to the river. They're pointing down at the dirt itself. There, etched into the earth, are shallow carvings, geometric patterns, repeated symbols, dots and lines that mirror the tattoos you've seen on skin. But these aren't random. These are earth marks, tattoo-like carvings meant to reflect the spirit and health of the land. The oldest elder chuckles at your confused face. "You mark the body to help it heal," she says, gesturing to her forearm. "Why not the land? It also breathes. It also aches." Mainstream historical fact: some Nubian communities practiced land-based rituals where symbolic carvings or rock markings were made to bless harvests, call rain, or protect boundaries. While not tattoos in the literal sense, these marks carried the same weight of meaning. They were applied with purpose, believed to influence health, not of people, but of place. You crouch next to a spiral carving into a sun-bleached stone. The elder explains, it's called the water belly. If the river recedes too far or floods too quickly, they feed the spiral by placing fish bones and crushed salt inside. It's a way to ask the land to rebalance itself. It listens, she says, as though the earth has ears. And who's to say it doesn't? Then you see something even stranger. A group of children are painting temporary ink patterns on the trunks of fig trees. One paints a zigzag like a lightning bolt, another a looping design like a sleeping snake. For rain and for harvest, a girl explains. These are ephemeral tattoos, meant to fade but not be forgotten, like words whispered to the wind. Fringe tidbit? There are stories of tattooed stones, smooth rocks passed from hand to hand, each bearing a mark for protection. Some believe they were used during childbirth, placed beneath the mother's bed. Others say they were carried by travelers, like ancient worry stones. A few particularly bold legends claim that if you marked a stone with someone's illness and threw it into the river, the sickness would drift away downstream. No word on whether the river appreciated that. Historians still debate how much of this practice was symbolic versus functional. Some argue the land tattoos were mostly ceremonial. Others believe there may have been a primitive form of ecological acupuncture, targeting sacred spots on the land like pressure points. That part's hotly contested, but everyone agrees on one thing. In Nubia, healing extended beyond the body. And here comes the laugh. One young boy, watching you study the carvings, proudly points to a rock with a triangle carved into it and says, "That's to keep my sister from annoying me." His sister, nearby, rolls her eyes and smears a mud spiral right over it. Ancient sibling rivalry, preserved in dirt. You're handed a small carving tool and encouraged to make your own mark. Hesitant at first, you settle on a simple loop with a dot inside, something that feels balanced, quiet, personal. One of the elders nods in approval. "That's a good one," he says. Speaks calm. As the sun shifts, the light makes the marks on the land shimmer faintly, like they're breathing with the wind. You realize this isn't just about superstition or aesthetics. It's about harmony. For the Nubians, wellness wasn't isolated. Your health, the health of the river, the soil, the animals, all of it was woven together. Even your tattoo, that little line of ink on your arm, isn't just about you. It's about your place in this web, how your story, your wellness, your silence or joy or sorrow echoes through everything else. Healing is never solitary here. You walk back slowly, toes pressing patterns into the dirt with every step. The wind picks up just a little. A few birds scatter overhead. Somewhere behind you, a new carving is being etched into stone. Maybe it's just coincidence, or maybe, just maybe, the land really was listening.
You return to the village just as the shadows begin to stretch long and thin across the sand. Tonight, there's a quiet sense of preparation in the air. Not hurried, not frantic, but methodical. The matriarchs have agreed to let you witness something incredibly rare. A full-body ceremonial tattooing, not for healing this time, but for rite of passage. The recipient? A young woman named Kemi. She's barely 20, but she carries herself like someone twice her age. Shoulders squared, eyes steady. Tonight marks her transition from apprentice healer to full-fledged practitioner. And in Nubian tradition, that transition is written into the skin. Kemi sits calmly in the center of a small circular courtyard. Around her, the tools are being laid out. Polished bone needles, a clay bowl filled with thick dark ink made from soot and date resin, clean cloths, and a tiny jar of honey for pain. You take your place among a respectful ring of observers. Most are silent, a few murmur blessings. The air is warm and humming with tension, like the pause before a storm. And then the tattooing begins. Mainstream historical fact: in ancient Nubia, tattoos weren't reserved only for illness or injury. They were also used to mark important life transitions: adulthood, motherhood, warriorhood, spiritual awakening. These tattoos were often more intricate than medical ones, and frequently included symbols of identity, lineage, or divine protection. The first mark is placed at the base of Kemi's spine, a looping glyph that resembles both a spiral and a question mark. It's said to represent the beginning of knowing. From there, the patterns slowly expand outward, down the thighs, across the shoulders, around the navel. Each symbol has meaning. Dots for clarity, triangles for balance, jagged lines for resilience. One particularly unusual symbol, a stylized fish with 3 tails, is met with murmurs of approval. It's a rare one, given only to those who have swum through shadow and come out singing. Fringe tidbit: some Nubian tattoo artists were said to receive their designs in dreams. They would wake up with a clear image of a pattern meant for someone specific, even before meeting them. These dreamed tattoos were seen as deeply sacred.
If the recipient refused the mark, it was believed to bring imbalance, not just to the person, but to the whole village. Kemi doesn't flinch as the ink bites into her skin. Instead, she breathes slowly in time with the rhythm of the tattooist's work. Around you, the energy shifts. This isn't just art, it's transformation. One elder leans over and whispers that Kemi's marks follow the serpent path, a rare design meant to mimic the slow winding of the Nile. It suggests healing, patience, and the ability to strike when necessary. He chose it herself, he adds. Bold. Historians still debate the line between medical and ritual tattoos in Nubia. Were they separate systems, or did they overlap constantly? Some argue that the distinction is a modern imposition, that to the Nubians, every tattoo was both functional and spiritual. A symbol could relieve pain and serve as a rite of passage. A pattern could ease childbirth and connect the wearer to their ancestors. Kemi's face remains calm, but her hands clench briefly during a particularly painful stretch across the ribs. Someone nearby offers her a thin reed to bite on. She declines. Later, someone tells you the pain is part of it, not just endured, but invited. To be marked is to be reminded that growth costs something. You watch the final symbol being added to the back of her hand, a sunburst made of short, radiating lines. So her hands remember the light, someone explains, even when her work is hard. When it's done, the tattooist dips her fingers in a shallow bowl of oil infused with herbs and gently presses them over the fresh ink. The scent of eucalyptus and myrrh rises in the air. The mood shifts from focus to reverence. Kemi stands slowly, her skin shining and swollen, a new story etched across her body. And then comes the moment that gives you chills. The matriarch approaches and adds one small mark of her own, just a tiny dot behind Kemi's left ear, a blessing, a whisper, a promise that she is now a keeper of stories, a bearer of knowledge written in skin. Everyone breathes out, as though they've been holding that breath for generations. Here's the unexpected laugh. As Kemi stretches, one of the children pipes up, "Does that mean she can finally tell me what's in the medicine jar?" Another child replies, "Nope, now she definitely won't." Even sacred transitions leave room for teasing. As the night settles in and the stars begin to flicker awake, a soft drumbeat begins. Low, rhythmic, almost like a heartbeat. Kemi doesn't dance, not yet. She simply stands there, newly written, glowing in firelight. And you realize tattoos here are not just decoration, not just therapy. They are initiation, inscription, invitation, a way to remember who you were and declare who you're becoming. Tomorrow she'll return to her work, soothing fevers, reading paths, but tonight she is a living manuscript, freshly inked and ready to be read.
The next morning arrives soft and golden, filtering through woven reed shades and casting sleepy patterns on the walls. You wake to the rhythmic pounding of a mortar and pestle, the scent of ground herbs curling into your nostrils like an invisible hand. The tattoo matriarchs are already up, preparing something special today. A lesson in tattoo ink alchemy. If tattoos are the text, then the ink is the voice. And like any voice, it matters how it's made. You step into a shaded workspace where several bowls are arranged in a crescent on the floor. Each bowl contains a different substance: burnt date pits, powdered clay, crushed malachite, dried indigo leaves. An elder, her hands stained with charcoal and oil, beckons you closer. Ink is not just color, she says. It is medicine, memory, and mood. Mainstream historical fact? Ancient Nubians used a variety of materials for tattoo inks: carbon black from soot, iron-rich minerals, and plant-based dyes. The exact combinations varied depending on purpose.
Medical tattoos favored anti-inflammatory compounds. Spiritual ones leaned into color symbolism. Some ingredients were believed to carry energetic properties like protection, clarity, or resilience. You watch as a younger healer starts mixing today's ink. First, she adds soot from a burnt fig branch, chosen for its association with cleansing. Then she stirs in crushed, dried tamarind bark. For grounding, she says. A dash of honey is added, not for taste, but to bind the ink to the skin and soften the sting. The final touch? A droplet of goat's milk, rumored to make the ink last longer. Fringe tidbit? Some tattoo inks were said to be whispered over during mixing. Healers would recite a short protective chant as they stirred, believing it infused the ink with intention. While modern science has yet to confirm whether whispered ink heals faster, the psychological impact of ritual is undeniable. You feel it even now watching the process. This isn't just chemistry, it's craft. The matriarch invites you to grind a small pile of myrrh resin. The scent rises, smoky and warm, and your arms ache after just a minute of grinding. The ink remembers your labor, she says gently. It becomes yours. Once mixed, the ink is tested on thin strips of dried goat skin etched with a short stick. The line is crisp and dark. You're surprised by how permanent it already looks. If the ink sings, they say, you don't need to shout. And then comes the surprise. A small vial of ink sealed with beeswax, cloudy and golden brown. It's called whisper ink, used only for hidden tattoos, applied behind the ear, beneath the ribs, or even inside the lip. The recipe? A closely guarded secret, but you're allowed to sniff it. It smells like earth and lightning. Historians still argue about the use of color in Nubian tattoos. Were they always dark? Were certain shades used for specific ailments or life stages? Some believe hints of blue or green were applied using copper-based pigments. Others say color was symbolic, but not literal, spoken of but not used. The debate continues, mostly because pigments fade differently over time, and ancient samples can be elusive. You're told about one healer who once used red ochre ink during a plague, marking small dots on villagers' wrists, not to prevent illness, but to protect hope. The dots meant, I am still here, your guide says. That's worth remembering. A child runs in, holding a fig leaf with a drop of ink on it. Look, she says, pressing it to her arm like a temporary tattoo. Everyone laughs. Even here, with all this ancient ritual, there's room for play. After all, isn't play also a kind of memory? You ask if the ink ever reacts with certain skin. The answer is of course. Each person's skin tells its own story. Some absorb pigment deeply, others reject it. Some need more honey, others more ash. Tattooing, the elder says, is like cooking. You follow the recipe, but you taste as you go. The final step of ink alchemy? The blessing. Once the ink is mixed and tested, it's left under the sun for 1 hour so it can breathe with the day. And if it's a special batch, the matriarch might place her hand over the bowl and whisper a word known only to her. That's how you know it's truly ready. You step back and look at the inks lined up. Dark, rich, waiting. It's easy to forget how much intention goes into something so small. But here, every dot, every drop, every swipe of pigment carries weight. It carries purpose. And maybe that's the lesson for today. The magic isn't just in the symbol. It's in the making. It's in the patience, the practice, the hush between breaths as the ink is stirred. You leave the workshop with a smudge of soot on your cheek and the faint scent of eucalyptus clinging to your sleeves. The wind carries laughter from across the village. You walk slower than usual, your thoughts sticky and sweet,
like the ink cooling in the bowls behind you.
The evening air is soft again, brushing gently across your face as the village quiets into its twilight rhythm. Tonight, you're invited to something even fewer outsiders have witnessed, a storytelling circle. But not the kind you expect. This one is entirely about tattoos as oral history tools, a living, breathing archive passed not just through words, but through skin. You settle into a circle of worn cushions and woven mats beneath a canopy of rustling date palms. A fire crackles low in the center. Around you, the elders and a few younger storytellers begin to unfasten their outer robes, slowly revealing parts of their tattooed skin: wrists, shoulders, ankles, backs. These tattoos aren't hidden for shame, but reserved for moments that matter. This is one of them. The matriarch speaks first. Her voice is slow, sure, and dusted with mischief. "You see this?" she says, lifting her arm to reveal a thin black line spiraling from wrist to elbow. "This is my grandmother's migration path. Every twist, a place she stopped. Every dot, a person she lost or loved." Mainstream historical fact: among some Nubian tribes, tattoos did serve as mnemonic devices, literal memory aids etched onto the body. Scholars believe certain symbols weren't just aesthetic or spiritual, but encoded information like family trees, tribal affiliations, travel routes, or even seasonal rhythms. Imagine your Google Calendar, only made of skin. As more arms and backs are revealed, each mark carries a narrative. A broken arrow near the heel, the site of a tribal skirmish, a turtle shell on a shoulder blade, a summer spent in stillness during a drought, a honeycomb around the belly button, the memory of childbirth, and the sweetness of survival. One of the storytellers points to the back of her neck. 3 vertical dashes. "My father gave these to me when I turned 13. They mean, still standing." Then she winks. "I added the 4th one myself last year. Divorce." The group bursts into laughter, not mocking, but recognizing. Even humor gets a mark here. Fringe tidbit: some stories claim there were once traveling tattoo bards, healers and artists who journeyed between villages collecting stories and preserving them through custom tattoos. You'd sit with them for hours, tell them your tale, and they'd offer a symbol to wear forever. No ink without story, no story without truth. You ask how these tattoo stories are remembered. Do they get lost when the person dies? Not quite. The stories are told again and again until someone else earns the right to wear a mark from it. It's not copying, it's continuity, like passing down a family recipe with your own spice added. Historians still debate the accuracy of tattoos as memory. Some say too few examples exist to prove a system of oral history. Others argue the lack of surviving skin doesn't mean the tradition didn't exist, just that it was deeply personal and often invisible to outsiders. What's clear is that in Nubian culture, memory is never static. It's worn, walked, told, and, yes, retold. Someone points to a tattooed bird on a man's chest. She says, "That's for his brother. He flew across the Nile and never came back." The man nods once, eyes shining. No words needed. You're given a chance to share a story. You hesitate, unsure what's worthy, but someone nudges you. It doesn't have to be grand, it just has to be yours. So you speak of a hard season, a small victory, a person you still miss. And the matriarch listens.
really listens. When you finish, she presses a warm hand to your arm. If you ever want the mark, we'll help you choose the right one. Then comes a surprising tradition, story chants, soft, rhythmic songs based on tattoo symbols. Each storyteller hums or chants a version of their ink's meaning. You hear the ripple of melodies, low, bright, fluttering. The fire flickers, the palm trees sway like they're listening. And you realize something. These tattoos don't just mark history, they sing it. A young boy leans into his grandfather's side and asks if he can get his first mark soon. He says, "Not until you've earned a story, but you're close." As the night deepens, you close your eyes to the soft chorus of humming, the warmth of the fire, and the knowledge that stories, real ones, don't need paper. They need skin and time and the courage to speak them aloud.
By morning, the sky is a pale watercolor wash, and your bones feel loose with sleep. But there's no time to linger in bed today. The village is stirring early, preparing for something that only happens every few seasons, the tattoo market. It's not a market in the way you'd expect. There are no stalls hawking spices or woven rugs. Instead, this is a gathering of tattooists, healers, charmers, and storytellers from far-flung communities, all here to share their ink wisdom, barter techniques, and, if the vibe feels right, give or receive new tattoos. You follow a winding path through low dunes to a clearing lined with colored cloths billowing in the breeze. There are people everywhere, and nearly all of them are marked, some modestly, others lavishly. One man wears looping tattoos across his cheeks like painted music. A woman has tiny symbols encircling each knuckle like protective rings. The atmosphere is electric, but not loud. It hums, a communal kind of reverence. You feel it in your chest. Mainstream historical fact? In many ancient cultures, Nubia included, tattooing wasn't isolated to the home or clinic. There were gatherings, festivals, and communal rites where body art became a shared event. Tattooists would travel, build reputations, even apprentice one another in techniques passed down by hand and ink. You're introduced to a visiting healer from a northern village. She doesn't speak your language, but she smiles warmly and taps the side of her neck, showing off a line of tiny fish tattoos. Each one represents a successful cure. You can't help but grin. There's pride in that ink. Nearby, a tattooist is demonstrating a rare method called heat pressing, using a carved bone stamp, heated over fire, then pressed lightly into the skin to pre-mark designs before inking. Safer for elders, someone explains. The stamp speaks first. The needle follows gently. Fringe tidbit? Some Nubian legends say that certain tattoos could only be given under moonlight and only at market gatherings. The ink used for these was mixed with nighttime dew collected on fig leaves, believed to remember dreams. You see one elder preparing a shaded tent nearby. "For the moon marks," she whispers. You pass a station where young apprentices are practicing on gourds, etching small patterns with reverent focus. Their mentors lean in, correcting finger positions, reminding them to breathe. If your hand shakes, so will their memory, one says. In a quieter corner, someone is bartering for ink pigment, not with coins, but with dried herbs, a carved comb, and an embroidered sash. The exchange isn't about price, it's about trust. Value here is relational. One tattooist gifts a small vial of soot to another. "You'll need it for the twins coming next month.
they'll be fussy. Historians still argue whether tattoo markets were formal events or fluid gatherings. Were they announced in advance? Did certain villages hold specific reputations? Some accounts suggest a loose seasonal calendar. Others say they happened when the air felt right, which honestly sounds better than any RSVP. And here's the kicker. You spot a tattooist using a double needle tool, 2 fine bones tied together to make parallel lines. Faster, she says with a wink, for when the pain needs to end quickly. Efficiency with empathy, a classic Nubian touch. Laughter rings out nearby. A man has just agreed, reluctantly, to let his daughter give him his first ever tattoo. It's a crooked sun on his ankle. "It's terrible," he says proudly, "but it's hers." The girl beams. You sit for a while, watching the ebb and flow. There's no rush, no hard sell, just an unfolding rhythm, like breath or tide. You realize the tattoo market isn't just about ink. It's about remembering that healing and identity are collective acts. A tattooist waves you over, offering a small ink mark on your thumb, a symbol of having witnessed the market. You hesitate, but only for a second. The ink is warm. The sting is brief. The meaning? Quietly profound. You look down at your hand. There it is, a tiny circle, not much larger than a lentil, but it speaks of this moment, this gathering, this shared space of memory. And just like that, you've joined the archive.
You wake before dawn the next day. The village still cloaked in soft blue shadows. Today marks the Healing Review, a semi-annual ritual where the tattooed sick or injured return to their healers, not just for touch-ups, but for reflection. You're told it's a kind of check-in for the body and the story. You follow a quiet procession down to the river's edge. The early light sparkles on the water, and birds flit low across the reeds. People gather, unwrapping bandages, removing jewelry, baring skin. This is not a display of wounds. It's a celebration of endurance. Your guide, now familiar with your wide-eyed silence, explains, "We look at what the body remembers and what it might be forgetting." Mainstream historical fact: ancient Nubian healers practiced ongoing care. Tattoos were not one-and-done solutions. People returned regularly to evaluate how a symbol's effect was holding, whether pain had shifted, illness receded, or emotional burdens lightened. Ink was maintenance, not miracle. A young man sits cross-legged beside a healer, pointing to a faded mark near his collarbone. "The cough is back," he whispers. The healer examines the skin gently, not just the tattoo, but the surrounding energy. She taps twice, makes a note in the sand, and begins to remix the ink. Nearby, a woman with arthritis presents her wrists, each bearing symmetrical spiral tattoos applied 6 months ago. Her pain has lessened, she says, but moved to her knees. "Ah," her healer nods, "the storm has shifted." New tattoos are planned, dots at the base of each thigh like punctuation. The sentence continues. Fringe tidbit: some healers claimed that when a tattoo stopped speaking, meaning it no longer affected the ailment, it could be coaxed back to life by singing softly to it. The idea was to remind the skin of its story. You hear a few quiet murmurs now, gentle phrases in a tongue you don't fully know, but understand nonetheless. Children mill around too, tugging on sleeves, showing off fresh marks, or asking for their first. One little girl wants a star behind her ear. "To help me listen better," she says seriously. Her mother laughs, but agrees.
A small ritual follows. A pinch of salt on the tongue, a dab of honey on the mark. Bitterness and sweetness, like memory itself. Historians still debate whether Nubian tattoo healing was symbolic or somatic. Did the symbols actually treat physical conditions, or were they metaphors, tools for redirecting attention and intention? Some argue it doesn't matter. Healing isn't just chemistry, it's context. You believe it, sitting here, watching the care in each gesture. Your guide lets you peek into a ledger, a fabric scroll inked with hundreds of tiny pictographs. Each one marks a person, a date, a healing. The writing isn't linear, it spirals, winds, doubles back, like pain, like healing. And here's your quirky delight for the day. Apparently, there's a joke among tattoo healers that if a patient returns too soon, it means they just missed the attention. One healer whispers to another, "Ah, here comes old backache again. He just wants the honey." Everyone chuckles. Even pain, it seems, needs a little levity. You assist briefly, holding supplies, offering water, pressing warm cloths to newly tattooed skin. Someone thanks you in a language that vibrates through your chest. You nod, not needing to understand the words. As the sun climbs, the mood shifts. The review is winding down. People rewrap their limbs, reclothe their torsos. A few remain to sing to the river, letting the water carry the echoes of pain, relief, and endurance downstream. You sit by yourself for a moment, staring at the sand. You think of your own body, its scars, its stories, the invisible symbols it carries. What would your tattoo say? Where would it go? A shadow passes and your guide kneels beside you, placing something small in your palm, a seed pod, rough and delicate at once. For planting later, she says, even healing needs new soil. You nod quietly, tucking it into your bag, and as you walk back to the village with the others, sun on your face, dust in your shoes, quiet pride in your chest, you know something's changed. You've seen ink not as art, not as medicine, but as witness. And maybe, just maybe, you're ready to wear a little witness of your own.
The sun sinks lower now, its golden light melting into long shadows that stretch across the rooftops and reeds. Your time here is drawing to a close, and though no one says it outright, you can feel the shift. The quiet glances, the lingering handshakes, the way people hold their goodbyes just a little longer than usual. Tonight is your last evening with the tattooing community of Nubia, and fittingly, you've been invited to participate in a closing rite, the ceremony of the final mark. It doesn't mean the last tattoo of someone's life. Rather, it's a symbolic tattoo offered to those about to leave, migrate, or undergo transformation. A mark not to heal a wound, but to seal a chapter. You're led to a small courtyard lit by oil lamps and scattered petals. A bowl of ink has already been prepared, deep black with flecks of something reflective. Crushed obsidian, your guide says. It holds memory well. Mainstream historical fact? Final mark rituals did exist in various forms across Nubian communities. Sometimes they signified coming of age, marriage, or mourning. But there are also accounts, written in passing by early travelers, of marks given as tokens of departure, protection, or even forgiveness. You're offered a choice of 3 symbols. One is a wave, representing return. One is an eye, for vision beyond distance. The third is a woven knot, connection that cannot unravel. You take your time, too much time maybe, but this isn't about hurrying. You choose the knot. As the tattooist begins, you close your eyes. The needle is finer this time, the touch gentler.
There's no pain, just a warm tingle and the faint scent of clove oil. A hush falls over the courtyard. Fringe tidbit? Some elders believe that the final mark doesn't fully appear until the person dreams with it. Tonight, one tells you, your dream will finish the design. You nod, hoping your subconscious is up for the task. Historians still argue whether final marks were mandatory or elective. Some claim they were status-based, others entirely personal. What's clearer now, sitting here in this hush of flickering firelight, is that intention carries more weight than consensus. When the mark is finished, a cloth is pressed gently against your skin. You're given a cup of warm hibiscus tea, sweetened just enough to make your tongue curl, and a small stone to hold while the ink dries. To weigh down the memory, someone whispers, so it doesn't float away. And now, slowly, the ceremony winds down. Someone sings, a low, wavering note that rises like smoke. Another person adds harmony. The fire crackles in rhythm. You don't know the words, but your body understands the meaning. You feel yourself softening, not just from fatigue, but from belonging. You look around at faces now so familiar. You see their tattoos anew, not just as symbols, but as chapters. Some old and fading, some sharp and new, all alive. You think of the first mark you saw here, tiny dots on a child's shoulder, and the one just given to you, still warm beneath your sleeve. You think of everything in between, the stories, the laughter, the ink, the breath, the long silences between words that somehow said the most. A boy runs past you barefoot, arms painted in charcoal and joy. An elder hands you a small pouch of herbs. For your dreams, she says. A healer nods solemnly, then grins, revealing her own tattoo of a goat drinking tea. Your guide takes your hand. You came curious, she says. You leave remembered. And that feels right.
As you settle beneath your blanket, real or imagined, and let your breath slow, remember the hush of that courtyard, the way the firelight danced across skin, the quiet, steady hands of the tattooist, the softness of the ink's first kiss against your flesh. Let your mind drift to the sound of a gourd being tapped to test its echo, to the warm weight of a seed pod tucked into your palm, to the laughter of women sharing whispered jokes under linen awnings, all of it alive in your memory now. You've walked in ancient footsteps, feet pressed into the same dust, hearts beating to the same quiet rhythms of care, healing, and remembrance. You've seen tattoos not as rebellion, not as decoration, but as language, a language of pain, of joy, of becoming. And now, as the night wraps itself gently around you, know that the stories etched in Nubian skin are not lost. They live in the hum of your breath, the pulse in your wrist, the curl of your spine as you finally let go. So breathe in and out. Feel your weight sink deeper. Let the symbols of memory and healing float softly behind your closed eyes. You're safe. You're held. You're part of the archive now. And maybe, just maybe, when you wake, your dream will have drawn its own final mark. Sleep well.